together the details of what happened on the night of Wednesday, the 3rd of December 2025 on Belmont Road in Southampton might be pointless. We know the gist, but still, it is interesting to do so. And again, the only reason I ever heard about this, and I reported on it, I would say, fairly early in comparison to everybody else, I only heard about it from like a couple of random account tweets like a couple of weeks ago. Like, I think my stream on the first time I touched on this was only like a couple of weeks ago.
Flashback.
So I started seeing some tweets about this happening the other day. Henry Nowak, 18, drowned in his own blood as he lay cuffed and passed out on the street. He was stabbed multiple times by Vikram Digwa, 23, with an 8-inch Sikh ceremonial knife. And so I was like, I would like to know more about this. Someone here quote retweeted the Daily Mail post. It said, police were called to the scene but arrested Mr. Nowak after Digwa claimed he had been racially abused. Mr. Nowak was then handcuffed before passing out and dying in the street a short time later.
End of flashback.
The fact that this happened in December and only a couple of Twitter posts managing to like break onto my timeline is what informed me of this. 0 articles from anywhere, 0 coverage from anywhere should make your blood boil. This is a white man who was stabbed by a foreigner who shouldn't have been in his country, who shouldn't have been carrying a knife under the UK's laws, and this guy tried to get off from murder by claiming the white guy was racist. It is insane. It is insane that it took so long to get any of that information out. Henry Nowak was an 18-year-old from Essex of Polish descent. He was intelligent and did well at A-levels. With those, he got into an accountancy and finance degree at the University of Southampton. A well-adjusted, social and ambitious young man, he was responsible, working part-time at a supermarket to help support himself. His family said Henry was loved by all those that knew him. He was an incredible son, brother, cousin, grandson, nephew, friend, and teammate. He was an all-around top lad, and everyone who was lucky enough to share his company thought the same. He also enjoyed sport, joining 2 football teams within his first term at university. On the 3rd of December, that first term was nearing its end. To celebrate, one of his teams gathered at the Hobbit pub. At 11:07 p.m., Nowak left the Hobbit and began making his way home to his halls of residence, most likely Portswood House, which is at the top of Belmont Road, a quiet residential street lined with big houses on both sides. He was slightly drunk from his merrymaking, but within the legal limit for driving. Stumbling back to halls at night is something that virtually every male student in Britain has done throughout the ages, but Nowak was in modern Britain. Vikram Singh Digwa, a 22-year-old Sikh, lived nearby in his family's house on St. Denis Road. Oddly enough, he also worked in accountancy, being accepted by a local firm. However, his own community were wary of him. They had barred him from a temple for bad behavior. Fulfilling religious requirements, he wore a small kirpan dagger around his neck, under his clothing. But he is a Sikh order called the Nihang, for whom carrying a second weapon is customary. So he also had an 8-inch Peshkab's sword hanging sheathed from his waist. Aside from any religious obligations, he was obsessed with bladed weapons and had trained with them since the age of 12. Well, isn't that kind of nifty that there's a special Sikh order that carries an extra sword? Gee, Parang, your sect allows you 2 knives? On the night Digwa had just come home from a Deliveroo. I have a question. If Vikram Digwa was also in accounting and had been accepted by a local firm, why was he also doing Deliveroo? This article gets like more stereotypical the more I read. At about 11:15 p.m., he left his house to fetch some curried chips from a car parked on Belmont Road. Another report says he was parking his car there at 11:17 p.m. The 2 men encountered each other on the pavement at number 70. Nowak was about 3/4 of the way home. He happened to be filming a video for Snapchat at the time. In this footage, he can be heard saying, "Hello, car," and singing to himself before yawning. This suggests to me he was slightly drunk and tired in a placid and lighthearted mood. He paused filming as soon as his interaction with Digwa began, so we don't know exactly how that happened. Digwa claims that Nowak deliberately bumped into him and then told him he could have moved a little more. Then said, "Do you think you're a bad man? I'm from Essex. You don't know what people from Essex are on." I've heard that, but apparently that wasn't something that was said in the court case, so that's maybe made up, question mark? In modern British slang, bad man, not bagman, but also bagman now, means a gangster, someone who is comfortable using violence. Nowak resumed filming. The footage shows Digwa walking away and Nowak saying, "In it, bad man. What bad man? You're a bad man. Say you're a bad man. Go on." Digwa replied, "I'm a bad man," and then walked back towards Nowak and grabbed his phone, at which point the footage ends. In court, Digwa said he grabbed Nowak's phone in response to being filmed, and that Nowak now got very aggressive, punching him, knocking off his turban, and saying, "I'm going to fuck you up, I'm going to kill you." Digwa testified that he did not mean to stab Nowak in the chest when he pushed him away. This is where Digwa's story, plausible enough until now, falls apart. How can you accidentally unsheath a sword and stab someone in the chest with it? It also seems unlikely that an intelligent and ambitious young man like Nowak, versed in the PC ways of modern Britain, would resume filming if he intended to racially abuse a non-white person. This is also a very good point to make. Only, like, bottom-of-the-barrel retard-type people would, like, just scream racial obscenities while filming themselves in the current era of, if you say something mean to a minority, they can kill you. That doesn't seem like it would be very well informed for someone to do. Especially for a law student. Not gonna lie, the whole shit only makes sense if Digwa was flashing his knife and acting like a stereotypical hard man. That would explain the "you're a bad man" comment. Yeah, you know? What's more, in both Snapchat segments, Nowak's tone is described as placid and lighthearted, not aggressive or threatening. With that in mind, a completely different interpretation based on the same footage is possible. He was walking along Belmont Road, hazily filming a Snapchat video, and bumped into someone. He paused filming so as to apologize, then, bemused by the sight of a turban-wearing man with a sheathed sword hanging from his waist, he thought his Snapchat friends might like to see, so he resumed filming. Slightly drunk, he engaged the stranger in banter, thinking he would enjoy it and play along. "In it, bad man. What bad man? You're a bad man. Say you're a bad man. Go on." And again, that meaning gangsta. Either way, the footage shows that Digwa did not respond well to this. I believe that, while Nowak was being jovial, Digwa was being serious, and feeling increasingly malevolent, coiling like a spring, preparing to strike. He replied to Nowak, "I am a bad man," and then approached him, snatched his phone, and ended the filming. Perhaps while a confused Nowak was demanding his phone back, Digwa drew his sword. He inflicted 3 stab wounds, a slash to Nowak's jaw, a stab to his groin area, and a stab to his chest. The blade punctures Nowak's lung and cut a major vein, slowly causing massive internal bleeding. Bizarrely, Digwa, now 11:22 p.m., began recording with his own phone. That footage shows Nowak attempting to escape, climbing on top of a bin to jump over a fence, leaving a trail of blood behind him, while Digwa taunts him, "You're not going to get away with this, big man," and stabs him twice in the back of his legs. Nowak managed to jump over the fence to number 68, landing on a car. I guess Digwa walked around to join him there, and at this point, Nowak seems to have been overcome by his injuries and stopped fleeing. Digwa, now assured of his quarry, stopped pursuing. The two young men now began a sort of captor-prisoner conversation. I picture them seated, one calm, one in agony. Nowak pleaded with Digwa to help him, and Digwa mocked him. Digwa even took close-up photos of Nowak, presumably admiring the injuries he had inflicted with his expert sword skills. That's crazy. He even took pictures? Prosecutor points to aggravating factors. The prosecutor says there should be a starting point of 25 years in jail, partly due to aggravating factors. He says Digwa chose to make videos of Nowak fleeing and took close-ups of him lying on the ground. Digwa's depiction to police of Nowak as a racist, drunk, violent aggressor compounds the natural grief and loss of the deceased family. That's actually insane. How did this man... fuck. Why does the UK not have capital punishment, dude? This is pure psycho behavior? Yeah, it is. It is. The starting point should be public execution. It should if we lived in a sane world. Footage from a home security camera has Nowak saying, "I'm dying," and Digwa replying, "You're not dying, bro." Then a full 10 minutes later, Nowak saying, "You stabbed me," and Digwa replying, "No, I didn't." Digwa was lying to his victim, as will later become clear, he knew he had stabbed him at least 3 times. Having denied he pushed him, Digwa now explained why he had punished him. "You were recording me thinking you're sick." Sick in this context means tough, daring, etc. Like bad man, it derives from Jamaican slang. Yet another gift of multiculturalism. I like how this guy has to translate for the rest of us. A woman resident heard their voices outside and called the police, saying she thought someone had been stabbed. Incredibly, it seems that nothing came of this call. That is actually wild that a woman called the police about this instance, and still police didn't come until Digwa's brother called claiming that there had been a racially motivated attack on them. Yeah, the police kind of deserve whatever the fuck's happening in the protest right now. Not gonna lie. During that 10-minute period, Digwa did not call an ambulance for Nowak. However, he did film him for a full 5 minutes. I presume this is a separate recording from his earlier capture of the stabbing of Nowak in the legs. That video was withheld from the trial for being too disturbing to be shown. You see, that's absurd. When you have evidence, especially evidence that points to someone doing something both intentionally and maliciously, that should absolutely be shown. I don't give a fuck if it's too disturbing. It should be shown. People need to understand the evil that they are dealing with. Otherwise, they will keep pushing it off to the side and saying, oh, it's not actually that bad. You need to understand. And this is like the mindset that I had when I watched so many other criminal things happening, several of which are like burned into my mind. If you are going to hate something, understand why you hate it. Be able to explain why you hate it. I will never forget the video of those backpackers being beheaded in Morocco. It was harrowing. It was too disturbing to be shown. No one should ever have to watch something like that. But if you don't watch it and you don't understand what these people are capable of doing, you will continue to live in ignorance and be fooled every single time. Digwa's brother arrived. Gurpreet was 26 at the time and himself had a form for threatening people in public with a sword. What the fuck? The brothers concocted a story. Digwa was a victim of racist abuse and assault by Nowak. Given later comments made between them in a police van, it is possible that at this point, Gurpreet genuinely didn't know what had happened and was simply taking his brother's word for everything. Whether or not Nowak knocked off Digwa's turban, the brothers agreed he had. Digwa's hair was in a tight bun in the footage he took after stabbing Nowak, highly unlikely if his turban had been knocked off. Either way, by the time police arrived, his hair was loose and hanging down over his face, which the prosecutor suggested he did so as to corroborate his story. The level they go to with which to lie is insane. Insane. Gurpreet now called 999 and relayed the fake story to the police. We've just got attacked racially by some white person. He's physically attacked my brother. We're Sikhs. We wear a turban. We have already read this earlier, so I'm gonna skip that. Gurpreet also explicitly denied that any weapons had been used. As a result, the police were unaware of any medical emergency and therefore did not summon an ambulance. Summon an ambulance like it's a fucking Aeon, bro. Either now or before Gurpreet called 999, he called their parents, Father Moga and Mother Kiran Kaur. They now arrived. Digwa and his mother conspired in Punjabi, and she took the sword and left the scene. Gurpreet filmed this on his phone. Why? Why would you film that? The sword was later found at their house among a huge collection of bladed weaponry that Digwa had been amassing since childhood. I just want to point out that if it weren't for the immense incompetence of these people involved, they probably would have gotten away with this murder. The police would have believed them and their cries of racism, and not had any sort of reason to believe that Henry was the real victim. The only reason we get a modicum of justice in this case, which I don't think there's real justice until the fucking murderer is capital punishmented, but like, executed is the word I was looking for. But like, their incompetence is the only reason they were caught. And that's sad. That is sad and depressing. Now they wait for police to arrive. During this time, the Digwas actively prevented Nowak from seeking medical help. They were holding him down, restraining him, and Gurpreet had told the police operator, I can't let him go until this gets sorted. This entire family guaranteed this teenager's death. The family seemed to have been determined that this white racist wouldn't get away with abusing young Vikram. But if they hadn't restrained him, Nowak could have rung on people's doorbells for help, or got to the main road and been seen by passing motorists. In fact, if Digwa had simply given him back his phone, Nowak could have called an ambulance himself. I think Millennial Woes here is still giving a bit too much benefit of the doubt. These are people who wanted Henry to die. They weren't going to do any of that. Yeah, they could have, but they would have had to have been understandably upset by doing something on accident, and this is in no way, shape, or form an accident. By now, it must have been at least 10 minutes since he had received the fatal blow. There was a trail of blood from his escape attempt, and given various wounds, there was almost certainly blood spilled everywhere by now. And the slash to his jaw would be clearly visible, and given that he had been telling Digwa, "I am dying," even before the family arrived, he would certainly be saying the same in front of them now. Yet none of the 4 Sikhs thought to call an ambulance for him. Instead, they spent this time accusing him of racism. Nowak denied that and insisted he had been stabbed. Digwa replied, "No one stabbed you, bro. You're drunk." The truth, Nowak was below the drink driving limit. Why is it called drink driving instead of drunk driving in the UK? And Digwa himself was the person who had struck him with a sword 5 times. Furthermore, Moga joined in, accusing Nowak of pretending to be injured. The police arrived at 11:37 p.m. By now, Kiran had returned to the scene and Moga was propping Nowak up. Perhaps because that would look better than his sons pinning the boy down on the ground. He explained to the police, "He keeps dropping down, so I'm just trying to keep him up." Why would he keep dropping down if he wasn't injured? Probably because that's also something drunk people do, and so he was trying to continue the lie that Henry was drunk. This question didn't seem to occur to either Moga or the police. Moga then quickly said that Nowak had a mouthful of blood, which aroused no interest in the police, even though it clearly indicates a serious internal injury. Instead, they took the Digwa's word for it that he hurt himself when jumping over the fence. Digwa himself distracted them for a while by claiming to be injured. A trivial bruise under his eye. I think if people really aren't understanding the implications of this case, you should be a lot more worried than you are. If you can get attacked and police will just de facto believe someone claiming you said something racist and handcuff you while you're dying, you are quite literally in danger no matter what you do. Nowak told the police he had been stabbed and couldn't breathe. Digwa told them he was pretending to be injured, specifically said he hasn't been stabbed, and reiterated that Nowak had assaulted and racially abused him. Lying on his side, Nowak told the police repeatedly that he couldn't breathe and that he had been stabbed. The police officer replied, "I don't think you have, mate." All it takes for a police officer to not believe a word out of your mouth is for the person who assaulted you to claim you did or said something racist. That is all it takes now. Unbelievably, the police now put him in handcuffs and said they were arresting him on suspicion of assault. Nowak said, "Please, brother, I can't breathe," his final words, and lost consciousness. He was now motionless and unresponsive, yet they proceeded to read him his rights. Actual clown bullshit. At this point, a female officer noticed that his pupils weren't reacting to light. This, exactly 3 minutes after the police had arrived, was when they realized he really was unwell and they had been lied to persistently by the Digwa family. The handcuffs, which had been on for nearly 2 minutes, not 1 minute as was claimed by a police chief, were removed and the police began CPR and summoned an ambulance. Digwa was arrested for attempted murder at 11:55 p.m. He was not handcuffed. That's still crazy to me. That they handcuffed the guy bleeding out because he's white and did not handcuff Digwa. Insane. An emergency doctor was also flown in by helicopter. When these medical professionals arrived is unknown, but it was a lot later than had the Digwa family been honest. However, no matter how soon they arrived, Nowak was doomed. The sword passed upwards through the soft tissue between 2 uppermost ribs, catching a lung and cutting an important vein behind the collarbone. Access to that vein would be impossible, so he would not have survived. However, quickly he received medical treatment. It was truly a lethal blow delivered by an expert in sword fighting. That is kind of wild. Even Hawkenfreres, thank you. Alternatively, the police did believe Nowak and didn't care. True. What's one more dead Briton? Doesn't matter to the British police. Henry Nowak was pronounced dead at the scene at 12:37 on the 4th of December, about 80 minutes after he encountered Vikram Singh Digwa. Within 4 days, Hampshire police had taken action against the entire Digwa family. 22-year-old Vikram Digwa has been charged with murder and possession of a bladed article in a public place. Officers charge 52-year-old Kiran Kaur with assisting an offender. There needs to be way more than just that. However, I will say, this seems like it was expediently fast that they did something about this, especially when you consider in our own country, nothing has happened to the murderer of Irina Zarutska. Nothing has still happened to the assassin who killed Charlie Kirk. Nothing has happened to Carmelo Anthony as of yet. His trial has just started over a year later. This seems incredibly fast to my American brain. Both Digwa and his mother have now been convicted of all the above charges. Police also arrested a 51-year-old man, Father Moga, on suspicion of murder, who has now been released on bail. A 26-year-old, Gurpreet, was initially arrested on suspicion of murder, assisting an offender in public order defense. Officers released him with no further action in relation to the murder, but he's on bail pending further inquiries for the other offenses. Why are they both released on bail? They literally helped kill this man. Come the fuck on. It is understandable why the murder charge was dropped against both men, but I am surprised that the assisting an offender charge against Gurpreet was dropped. I also think Moga could have faced the same charge. He must have seen his wife taking away the murder weapon, yet he stayed silent about this and told the police that Nowak was lying about being injured, even while he was having to prop him up. Are Moga and Gurpreet just incredibly stupid, unable to process incoming evidence if it contradicts what they've been told? Or is it simply that they were told by a relative? Is this the famous clannishness of Indians? Izzat. It is the Izzat culture, Mr. Millennial Woes, man. If he could have been seen quickly enough, they could have put tourniquets on the legs and started administering blood fusions. I don't know, because apparently the fatal blow was like in his torso, cutting some important vein under the collarbone. At the trial, Digwa maintained his innocence and insisted he had acted only in self-defense, terrified that Nowak might seize his sword from him and attack him with it. He also claimed he did not know that he had stabbed Nowak in the chest until police said it during his first interrogation. Throughout the trial, Hampshire police remained silent. This fueled rage and speculation. After the conviction, they said their silence had been to avoid prejudicing the trial. However, this concern hadn't stopped them tweeting about George Floyd nearly a year before Derek Chauvin's trial. That's true. But you know, a drugged up career criminal means so much more than an 18-year-old white British kid. You know?
Have you ever wanted a pet, but the responsibility of remembering to feed and water something alive is a horrifying prospect? Get your very own Kirsche today! This little guy is too low IQ to understand it's not alive! Do you already own the Conco's My Little Padded Room Magical Girl Kirsche plush? Well, get this companion Kirsche to keep her company! Or maybe you just want to commit war crimes with a reliable partner who won't snitch to Interpol about your dastardly doings. Get your Kirsche today! The Kirsche will continue to love you, no matter what. Except if you try to do it. Do not the Kirsche. The Kirsche is for loving, eating, and war crimes, not for doing. Buy a Kirsche for your Kirsche so that they don't get lonely inside your walls. Kirsches are valuable employees of Kirsche Mart, and if you find a Kirsche reverted back to a Kirsche, please call 1-800-Kirsche now to have her return to her original residence. Kirsches are also an endangered species due to severe retardation, overeating, and excessive use by world powers and military conflicts. Please know that owning a Kirsche does not give you the right to do it. The feds are listening to your every move. If you or a loved one has been assaulted by a Kirsche, contact authorities immediately, as you will not make it. You can buy your very own life-size Kirsche or a Kirsche for your Kirsche starting May 8th at 3 p.m. EST through June 5th at 8 p.m. EST. Get yours now before they escape and are gone forever.
The wickedness of Vikram Singh Digwa, like the wickedness or stupidity of his relatives, has been overshadowed by the behavior of the police officers who attended. True. For many, it confirms long-held beliefs that the British police are hopelessly woke. How didn't they immediately realize he had been stabbed? 3 things can be said in their defense. It was nighttime, blood spatters wouldn't be easily visible, the trail of blood he'd left was on the other side of the fence. 3 minutes is a long time to a dying man, but not long at all in ordinary human perception. 3 angry Sikh men were bombarding them with a false story that he had got hurt jumping over the fence. But even before Gurpreet called them, the police had already received a call from a resident of Belmont Road saying she thought someone had been stabbed. How on earth was this not combined with Gurpreet's report to prepare the officers for a potentially more complex scene than Gurpreet had described? This failure of police infrastructure is surely critical. Upon their arrival at the scene, Moga immediately told police that Nowak couldn't sit up on his own. Moga also told them Nowak had a mouthful of blood. He had been slashed around the jaw. A simple look at his face should have immediately told them a bladed weapon had been involved. He told them 4 times that he had been stabbed and 9 times that he couldn't breathe. They barely checked him for any stab wounds. When they arrived, he was literally 3 minutes away from death. He must have looked dreadful. And when we watched the body cam footage, they also had the, oh yeah, I guess we should check him, haha.
Sandy's been stabbed, so
where
let's
is it
just
you
check
think
him.
you've been stabbed? In the face?
Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
No.
What? Oh no, we have to check, don't we? And then fucking laughed? Are you kidding me? What is truly astonishing is that they handcuffed him. Even if it wasn't clear he had been stabbed, it was clear that he was in no state to cause trouble or violence, still less to run away. So there can be no justification for that. All in all, I think the predominant explanation for the police's conduct in these first 3 minutes is that they chose to prioritize racism above all else. And this is kind of what the UK police have been doing for years now, which is why you can get arrested for tweets. They chose to believe a brown man had been racially abused rather than that he had stabbed a white man. Within a day of the incident, Hampshire police knew that they had performed badly and referred to the incident to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Its investigation has been proceeding all this time, 6 months, and its findings must be published because the story is dumbfounding to the British public. And it is. It is very dumbfounding. The only conclusion is that police officers believe any kind of accusations of racism are above any kind of actual physical violence. For unknown reasons, police body cam footage was withheld. This also fueled rage and speculation. The British people wanted to know how politicized, anti-white, and therefore dangerous to them their own police service has become. I mean, you could have noticed that like before this happened. But yeah, it was finally released after Digwa had been sentenced. Some bits of fake news have spread about the story. That the police officers were all female. That's not true. You can definitely hear a male officer voice. They searched his phone and his father's phone for evidence of racism is apparently also fake news. The Kirpan legal exemption has only existed since 2019. I guess that's also fake news. In court, the judge reduced the charge from murder to manslaughter. In fact, he gave the jury the option to find Digwa guilty of manslaughter if they couldn't find him guilty of murder. I've written a separate essay about the legalities around the Kirpan and the calls to ban it. Also, there was speculation that the officers were non-white. This always seemed unlikely to me given the demographics of Southampton. I haven't seen that claim at all. But if anybody had claimed to me that the officers were non-white, I don't think I would have believed them. Because typically, it's like the suicidal white people who are most likely to believe the claims of racism, rather than have any sort of inkling of, wait a minute, are they lying to me? That would have explained the cops helping him. Well, Southampton is a dock city. It has a huge Asian demographic. I mean, yeah, I guess it would have explained cops helping with ISAP, but I don't think that would have been the case, right? Like, I would have been like, yeah, I would have expected the cops to be completely white and just believe the claims of racism. If they were minority cops, I don't think the Digwas would have had to lie. They would have just been like, Sar, here's what happened. Help me lie the most efficiently. Much like the police officers that have lied and shielded the grooming gangs, right? The police officers that have shielded the grooming gangs, they didn't need lies. They just know how to abuse the system better from their positions. And was disproven when the body cam footage was released. However, the fact that their race was immediately a matter of concern for people indicates how febrile, I've never seen that word before, a situation is created by diversity. Whichever side we're on, we all know that race is a fault line constantly waiting to rupture. The result is constant latent mistrust. A population constantly expecting betrayal and sabotage by the other. We simply shouldn't be living like this. That study about how the more diverse an area becomes, the less likely people are willing to give to local charitable options just lives rent-free in my head. Another facet of living with diversity is the constant threat for white people solely of being accused of not liking diversity, of being racist. Non-whites know that the R word has a magical effect on white people. If you apply it to one of them, his fellows will abandon and condemn him. This is why the Digwa family threw the word around very liberally. And this is just true. This is also what I said. Vikram to his family, Gurpreet to the police officer, the 3 Digwa men to Nowak, the 3 Digwa men to the attending police officers, Vikram to the police interrogators, Vikram to the jury at his trial, Vikram's white defense barrister to the jury, and the Digwa family to the court during sentencing. Even now, some brown people are trying to use it to make white people abandon and condemn Nowak. In court, the judge and Nowak's family felt they had to emphasize that he was definitely not racist, as if it would mitigate his being butchered if he were. Which is also, usually I'm just too busy thinking of them as cucks to go down this line of reasoning. Like, I just get so mad, my brain cannot logic out. But yeah, this is also what it signals, right? When you say like, he was just the most inclusive little guy. It implies that if he hadn't been an inclusive little guy, he would have deserved the butchering that he got, which is just not fucking true. For white people's sake, the R word has to be stripped of its magical power. One could argue that it, like a curse, killed Henry Nowak. The World Sikh Union said this white man racially barked at Sikh and came to attack him, and the Sikh guy defended himself, and in this, he died. It was a pure self-defense, nothing else. Maybe mind your own business from future. Yeah, you could just fuck off. In the aftermath, some Sikhs are closing ranks. How dare white people tar them all with the same brush? Yet any instance of white violence against non-whites is used to tar all white people. In any situation, whichever option harms white people is the one chosen. True. When a non-white attacks one of us, our collective outrage is used to demonize us. When one of us attacks a non-white, their collective outrage is used to demonize us. Narinder Kaur, a notoriously anti-white Sikh woman, has voiced solidarity with Muslims against racist whites. For many years, I have listened to white centrists squealing that Islam isn't a race. Well, how insightful does that stupid remark seem now? For clarity, on the back of this incident, I have seen Sikhs characterize animosity towards them as racist. Fairly soon, I expect to hear white centrists squealing, Sikhism isn't a race, in the pathetic hope that this will shield them from the dreaded R word. The truth is, the whole world thinks in racial terms, and white people should never have stopped doing the same. We might have always been individualistic, but only recently did we become stupid. This makes me think back to like when colleges were having like spaces that were free from white people, like white people couldn't go into certain spaces, and they were like, we need white people to have a racial awakening, much like what we're doing with everyone else. And I was like, I don't know if you want that, buddy. That's Now, of course, it is possible that a white family could conspire against an 18-year-old boy like the Digwa family did. I'm sure it's happened here and there, but it's much less likely to happen. And where it does happen, race isn't an issue. Nobody can suspect it of being a motivating factor. And it can't be used to mitigate or demonize the victim or the perpetrator or the police, judiciary, and media who handle the case thereafter. True. Moreover, everyone knows that race was a factor here. It was a factor not just in the mutual alienation which undoubtedly prompted the attack in the first place, and not just, as too many have concentrated on, in the actions of the police. Most of all, it was a factor in the behavior of the Digwa family. At some level, they saw the dying Henry Nowak as just a white guy. They probably associated him with every resentment and suspicion they've ever had about all white people. In that hour, he was a helpless avatar for them of the race they live amongst yet do not know, cannot know, and quietly despise. Maybe I'm secretly Millennial Woes alter ego VTuber, because I literally also said this earlier. And in addition to having said this earlier, it reminds me of, it was Uki Violetta, where he had all of these like really, really creepy things that he said about like white people. And you could tell it was like hatred and not joking. And I even gave him the benefit of like, yeah, you know, if you've been fucked about by a certain race of people, I could understand, you know, when you're younger, being kind of racist to them. I had that same experience when I lived around tons of fucking Puerto Ricans when I was a kid. If I see Puerto Ricans doing nothing but stabbing each other and shooting each other and beating a cat to death, I might get kind of racist as a kid toward that specific group of people, right? That just makes sense. That's what you see every day. But part of growing up is realizing, yeah, they're not all like that. That's not what everyone fucking does. That's just that specific group of people you lived around. And yet, unlike me, Uki seems to have carried that racism over into adulthood, and unfortunately, his brand of racism is not only allowed, but it is celebrated. Crashing out. Today's been the most validating thing in a long time. Uki going on about getting uncomfortable when old white people talk to him, just talking. Yeah, it's insane. Could a white family have treated him the same way? Yes, but their motivations would be different. Could the Digwas have had other non-racial motivations? Yes, but racial ones were there, making their contempt for him more likely, more real, more substantial, and more deadly. And in addition, if it was a white family that conspired like this and killed Henry, they wouldn't be able to use the magical get-out-of-jail-free card that is, he did the racisms! Like, they just wouldn't be able to use that. I mean, they could maybe try saying that, like, they're a family of gays and that he was homophobic, but that doesn't get treated in the exact same way as the racisms do. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows that. Just as birds of a feather flock together, racial difference combined with third world clannishness means that all white people are as vulnerable as Henry Nowak. This could happen to any white guy in Britain. Nowak was one of us. He might not have been fully English, but it doesn't matter. We identify with him, and we know that he suffered gravely by the nonsense that plagues us all in this multicultural dystopia. We care about him because race is real. It is so real, it probably caused his death. If current trajectories proceed and diversity increases in Britain, how much more perilous does the situation become for us white people? What happens when police are largely non-white, and instead of taking 3 minutes to wise up, they take 10, or simply decide not to? What happens when the Independent Office for Police Conduct is largely non-white, and even when misconduct is clear, they simply decide not to see it? What happens when the government is largely non-white, and even though the regulatory bodies are clearly corrupt, it simply decides not to do anything about it? Well, we kind of already have them not deciding to do anything about it in the US. Like, look at how far spread fraud is, and we have these dumb white liberal judges being like, oh, that's okay, you don't have to serve time, you're free to go. What happens when the political parties are largely non-white, so you can't vote for a less third world government? Without remigration, all of these things will happen well within this century. He's completely correct. And it's like that third world mentality of like, corruption is good if it is benefiting you, so don't do anything about it. And I would even once again stretch that to people in our government in the US, regardless of race, all have that mentality. It's just like a corruption of you as an individual when you get into power. They've already announced when they plan for it to happen by 2050. It was supposed to be by 2030. So their plan has definitely, thankfully, been derailed a bit. Even if all of the above paragraphs are false, even if race played no role in the motivation of anyone involved in this, and therefore we needn't fear the Great Replacement further corrupting our societies, even then, it is certainly true that had the Digwa family never been allowed into Britain, Henry Nowak would still be alive today. Digwa was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 21 years. Nowak will never see any of those years. His family will have to spend those years wondering what the promising, happy young man would be doing by now, if he had just walked on the other side of the road that night not so long ago. Henry Nowak's final hour was spent listening to alien people conspiring against him in a foreign language while using English to accuse him of racism and deceit. His final minutes were spent with British police dismissing his pleas for help. His final waking moments were spent in handcuffs on a cold December ground, while all of the above continued around him. We should be angry and disgusted with the Digwa family. We should be angry and disgusted with the Sikhs nationwide who are using this terrible incident to induce yet more white guilt in the native majority. We should be angry and disgusted with the Hampshire police who made a grotesque 3-minute mistake. I wouldn't even call it a mistake. Like, the way that they were talking, But there were many more people who could have helped Henry Nowak in all of the houses around him. There were people who must have heard his screams and pleas, people who could have rescued him from the foreigners, people who should have cared, people of his kind. For Belmont Road is 80% white. And this is where I've been talking about the decline in desire to help people. And every time I bring this up, I'll have a handful of people in chat push back on me. There was a woman who was getting robbed at some sort of college area, and there was a guy on a grassy hill directly next to this like assault and robbery happening who just sat there and watched it happen. And this was well after Daniel Penny as well. And Daniel Penny is another good excuse. A good man who should be seen as heroic, who was actually just completely trotted through a kangaroo circus. And it wasn't just to punish Penny. It was to punish all of us. It was to tell everyone watching, if you do the right thing, if you try to protect other people in public when they're getting attacked, you will suffer the consequences. You shall not help your fellow man. You shall not care when crime is committed around you. Keep your head down. Don't look at it. Don't intervene. That is your job. And I've been saying, I don't want to be like fucking China. I don't want murders to happen and people to just shit out babies on the sidewalk and nobody turns and looks in disgust and fear. That is not the society that our forefathers have built. That is not the society we should have to suffer. You should care about those around you. Our government should not punish great men for being heroic. Things need to change. There's also the coffee shop one where people just took TikToks with the guy bleeding out. Yeah, everything that has happened through my lifetime, I can see the degradation of you should not care about those around you. Don't call the police on a criminal. The police might be racist. Don't help someone who needs help. You might get implicated. Don't talk out about the fucking ridiculousness that the racism committee has you say after your child's been killed due to racism. Just say we need to all come together and be inclusive. Reject it. As an average person, the things that you can do are speaking out. Even if you feel like nothing else can be done, you still have your words, and they can't take that from you. They will try. They will try thusly. They will try to destroy you. But if you give up your words, if you give up speaking out against these kinds of things, speaking up for what is actually right, instead of these so-called anti-fascist warrior revolutionary LARPers, you're going to lose. It's going to be over. No one is coming to save you.